The heavy oak doors of the mansion opened with a creak, and Elena stepped inside. The long dining table was set not for dinner, but for something far colder, the reading of her father's will. The air was thick, silent except for the shuffle of papers in the lawyer's hands. Elena's heart beat faster, but she forced herself to sit tall, keeping her eyes on her father. Marian, her stepmother, sat close to him, her manicured hand resting lightly on his arm. Derek, her stepbrother, leaned back in his chair, confident, a smirk already tugging at his lips as though he knew what was coming. Elena sat across from them, her fingers tight around the edge of her chair. She had never been greedy, never asked for more than what was fair. But this moment, felt like it would be her father's last chance to show her that she mattered. The lawyer cleared his throat, and the words began to pour out. Houses, businesses, accounts, all carefully listed. Elena listened, waiting, her chest tight. Then the sentence came like a knife through her ribs. To my son Derek, I leave the estate, my shares, and all holdings in full. The room tilted. Elena blinked, not sure she heard it right. Her ears rang as the words echoed again. All holdings in full. Her lips parted, but no sound came. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the land. It was the meaning. Her father, the man who once carried her on his shoulders, the man she thought would always keep her safe, had given everything away to someone else. To Derek. Her throat burned as tears filled her eyes. She couldn't hold them back, couldn't stop the trembling in her chest. She wanted to speak, to ask why, but nothing came out. The silence was heavier than stone, broken only by Derek's smug smile and Marian's satisfied glance in her direction. Her father shifted in his seat, his voice steady but cold. Elena, he said, not even meeting her eyes, Derek needs it more. You'll understand one day. The words crushed her. Understand? How could she understand her own father choosing someone else over her? All the years she tried to be strong, to make him proud, to believe his love was unshakable. And here she was, invisible at his table, cut out of the life he built. Her tears slid silently down her face. She wanted to scream, to demand an answer, but her voice betrayed her. She sat there, broken and quiet, while Marian's hand tightened on her father's arm like a victor claiming her prize. And inside Elena's heart, a single, sharp question echoed louder than anything else. Why would a father betray his own daughter this way? Once close to her father after her mother's death, Elena had once believed he was her whole world. She was only 9 when her mother passed away, and in those early years of grief, her father had been her rock. He held her through sleepless nights, read her bedtime stories even when he was exhausted, and promised her that she would never feel alone. For a time it was true. Father and daughter had been inseparable, 2 broken souls holding on to each other. But everything began to change the day Marian entered their lives. At first, Elena tried to welcome her father's new wife. She thought maybe it would be good for him to smile again. Marian seemed kind, at least on the surface, and Elena, still young, wanted to believe she could have something close to a family again. But slowly, almost too carefully to notice at first, Marian began to push her aside. It started with little things. Marian deciding where they should go on holidays, what meals were cooked, what clothes Elena should wear. Soon it became bigger. Marian made sure Derek, her son from her first marriage, was always the center of attention. Derek was praised for the smallest effort, while Elena's achievements were brushed off like nothing. When Elena brought home her top grades, Marian would smile and say, "That's good, dear," before turning the conversation back to Derek's soccer game. Her father noticed, of course, he had to, but he chose silence. Maybe it was easier for him to ignore. Maybe he believed Marian was simply trying to build harmony. Whatever the reason, his blindness cost Elena dearly. She went from being his little girl to someone on the edge of his world, watching from a distance as Marian and Derek filled the space she once held. Still, Elena didn't stop trying. She worked harder at school, pushing herself to succeed. If she couldn't win her father's love through attention, she would win it through pride. She dreamed of the day he would look at her with the same warmth he once had, the day he would say, "That's my daughter." Years passed, and Elena grew into a young woman with quiet determination. While Derek leaned on the family's wealth and connections, Elena chose her own path. She studied law, often staying up late into the night with books spread across her small desk. She worked part-time jobs to support herself through school, refusing to rely on her father's money, even though it would have been easy to ask. She wanted to stand on her own feet, to prove that she was capable without anyone's help. And she did. By the time she graduated, she was already being noticed for her sharp mind and steady resolve. She didn't need her father's money to build her life, and she told herself she was proud of that. But deep inside, she still carried the little girl who wanted nothing more than her father's approval. Despite the years of distance, she believed her father loved her. Not openly, not the way he loved Derek, but quietly, deep down where no one could see. She told herself that the man who once held her through the worst nights of her childhood couldn't have vanished completely. He was still there somewhere, beneath Marian's shadow, beneath the lies and the distance. That belief kept her heart soft, even when she had every reason to let it turn cold. Now, as a grown woman, Elena had built a life of her own. She lived in a modest apartment, worked long hours at the law firm, and earned the respect of her peers. She wasn't rich, but she was strong. She wasn't spoiled, but she was independent. And yet, when she walked into her father's mansion for the reading of his will, a small part of her still hoped. She didn't expect millions. She didn't want estates or businesses. What she wanted was recognition, that her father still saw her as his daughter, that he had not forgotten the bond they once shared. Even a small token, a sign that she mattered, would have been enough. But instead, she sat at that long table and heard her father give everything away to Derek, as if she had never existed at all. It wasn't about the inheritance. It was about being erased, and that pain, silent, sharp, and unforgiving, was heavier than any fortune ever could be. After the will reading, Elena quietly slipped away from the dining hall, and found her father in his study. The room smelled of old books and leather, a place where she had once sat on his lap as a child, listening to him tell her that she was his bright little star. Now, standing in the doorway, she felt like a stranger. "Father," she said softly, her voice trembling but steady enough to be heard. He looked up from his chair, surprised, almost uncomfortable. "Elena, it's late. You should rest." She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Her hands shook, but she refused to back down. "I need to know. Why Derek? Why give him everything, and nothing to me?" His jaw tightened. He rose slowly, walking to the window, his back to her. "Family must stick together," he said at last, his tone calm but empty. Her heart dropped. That wasn't an answer. It wasn't even close. "I am your family," she whispered. "Or have you forgotten?" He turned then, but his eyes wouldn't meet hers. "Derek needs the support more than you. You're strong, Elena. You'll be fine." The word stung like acid. She would be fine? That was all she meant to him. Not a daughter, not someone worthy of his trust, just someone who could survive without him? "I don't understand," she said, shaking her head. "I've worked hard. I've never asked for your money. I never wanted your fortune. I thought I meant something to you." His silence was heavier than any answer he could have given. And then she remembered something Marian had said at dinner weeks ago, her sly voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Elena has her own life now. She hardly visits, hardly cares about what happens here." Her stomach twisted. "This isn't about me, is it? It's about her." Her father frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "She told you I was selfish, didn't she?" Elena pressed, her voice rising despite herself. "She told you I was ungrateful, that I don't care about this family. She's been filling your head with lies for years, and you chose to believe her instead of me." For a moment his face faltered. His eyes darted away, then back, like he wanted to deny it but couldn't. The truth was there in the hesitation, in the way his lips pressed together. Elena's chest tightened. Betrayal didn't come in loud explosions. It came in quiet choices, in a father trusting someone else's story over his daughter's truth. All those years she had fought to make him proud, and he had handed her heart to Marian's poison without question. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, but this time she refused to let them fall. She straightened her back, meeting his gaze. "I see it now. You don't know me anymore. You chose to believe her lies instead of the girl you once held in your arms. Maybe you don't even realize what you've done." "Elena," he began, but his voice cracked, uncertain. She shook her head. "No. Don't say anything. I don't want excuses. I don't want your money either. But I will fight for the truth. I won't let her erase me from your life, not like this." Her father's face paled, a flicker of guilt crossing his features. But he said nothing more. Elena turned toward the door, her steps steady despite the storm inside her. She wasn't fighting for inheritance anymore. She was fighting for her dignity, for her mother's memory, for the truth of who she was. As she left the study, one thought burned in her mind, sharp and unshakable. If they wanted her silent, they had chosen the wrong daughter. Derek flaunts his new power, rubbing it in Elena's face at every chance he gets. Only days after the will reading, he walked through the mansion as if he already owned it, his voice loud, his laughter sharp. He pointed out new plans for the estate, talked about renovations, and even told the staff how things would soon be different under his watch. When Elena visited her father, Derek made sure to be there too, leaning against the doorframe with a smirk. "Don't worry, sister," he said one afternoon, swirling a glass of wine. "I'll take good care of father's empire. You can keep working at that little law firm of yours. Someone has to fight parking tickets." Elena clenched her fists but said nothing. She had learned long ago that Derek thrived on her anger. Instead, she looked at her father, silently pleading for him to stop the cruelty. But he just sat back in his chair, saying nothing, his eyes tired, his silence cutting deeper than Derek's words. Marian only made things worse. She whispered into her husband's ear whenever Elena left the room, her voice low but poisonous. "She's changed," Marian would murmur. "She doesn't respect you anymore. She's only here because she wants money." And slowly, day by day, Elena saw her father grow colder, more distant. Where once there had been warmth, now there was only suspicion. The final blow came one evening at dinner. Elena tried to speak, to remind her father of the bond they once had. But he cut her off with a hard voice she barely recognized. "Enough, Elena. I don't want to hear about it anymore." The knife slipped in her hand, clattering against the plate. That was the moment she realized, if she stayed silent, Marian would win, and her father would never see the truth. So Elena made her choice. She filed a legal challenge against the will. The news spread through the family like fire. Derek stormed into her office the next day, red with fury. "You dare challenge me? You dare challenge father? You're pathetic, Elena. Greedy. Just like your mother." The words cut, but she refused to flinch. "This isn't about greed," she said calmly. "It's about truth." Her father, however, didn't see it that way. When she came to visit, he refused to look at her. "You've betrayed this family," he said, his voice heavy. "I thought you were better than this." The words nearly broke her. To him, she was no longer a daughter fighting for justice. She was the traitor. Derek and Marian wasted no time turning the community against her. They told neighbors that Elena had always been ungrateful, that she abandoned her father, that she only returned for money. At the club, people whispered when she walked by. At the grocery store, old family friends looked away, pretending not to see her. Everywhere she went, the rumor followed. Elena is greedy. Elena only cares about the inheritance. At night, in the quiet of her apartment, the weight of it all pressed on her chest. She wanted to scream, to give up, to vanish. But then Marcus would call. Marcus, her oldest friend, the one who had known her before Marian and Derek had changed everything. He listened, he believed her, and more than once he reminded her of the truth. "You're stronger than them," he told her one evening over coffee. "They want you broken, but you won't break. You're not fighting for money, Elena. You're fighting for yourself, for the girl who lost her mother, for the woman who built her life with her own hands." Those words kept her steady. But the battles only grew harsher. Family dinners became wars. Every bite of food was eaten in silence, or through clenched teeth. Marian would make sly remarks about outsiders who don't understand family loyalty. Derek would laugh and talk about what he would do with the estate. And her father, once her comfort, now sat with anger in his eyes, glaring at her as though she were the enemy. The night everything shattered, her father slammed his fist on the table, his voice echoing through the dining hall. "You are just like your mother." The room froze. Elena's breath caught in her throat. Her mother, the woman who had loved him, who had given him everything until the day she died. Was this his curse? His deepest insult? "Always stubborn," he spat. "Always ungrateful." Her fork clattered to her plate. Tears filled her eyes, but she held them back. "If being like my mother means standing for truth," she whispered, her voice shaking, "then I'll take it as a gift." The room was silent. Derek sneered. Marian smirked, and her father looked away, his face unreadable. That night, as Elena walked out of the mansion, the cold air hit her cheeks like a warning. The fight ahead would not be easy. She was outnumbered, outshouted, and painted as the villain in her own family's story. But deep inside, a flame refused to go out. They thought she was weak. They thought she would bend. But Elena had made her choice. She would fight until the truth was seen, even if it meant standing alone. Elena represents herself. She stood tall in the courtroom, her black suit simple but neat, her papers neatly stacked on the table before her. Across the room, Marian and Derek sat smugly with their expensive lawyers, dressed in sharp suits, whispering and laughing as though the outcome was already decided. They looked at her like she was a child playing pretend, like she had no chance against their wealth and power. The judge called the court to order, and the case began. The lawyers for Marian and Derek spoke first, their words dripping with confidence. They painted Elena as greedy, ungrateful, and unworthy of her father's inheritance. They told the court she had abandoned her family, that she only came back when she smelled money. Every sentence was like a dagger aimed at her heart. But Elena did not flinch. When it was her turn, she stood with calm strength. "This case is not about greed," she said firmly, her voice clear. "This is about truth, about protecting my father from those who would take advantage of him." The courtroom murmured. Marian's smile faded slightly, but she quickly crossed her arms and whispered something to Derek. Elena began to present her evidence. At first it was simple: records, contracts, dates. The opposing lawyers laughed under their breath, as though nothing she said mattered. But then Elena pulled out a folder she had saved for the right moment. "These," she said, holding up the documents, "are bank records. Records that show large amounts of money being moved from my father's company accounts into private accounts." The judge leaned forward. Marian shifted in her chair. Derek frowned. Elena laid out the pages one by one. "For years, Marian has been siphoning funds, millions, from my father's business. She hid the transfers under Derek's name, using him as a cover. To anyone looking closely, it appeared Derek was receiving legitimate payments. But these records prove otherwise. The money was going directly to Marian." Gasps filled the courtroom. Derek's face drained of color. "What?" he whispered, grabbing at the papers. Elena continued, her voice steady but full of fire. "This was never about Derek inheriting the estate. This was about Marian taking control of everything, using her own son as a shield." All eyes turned to Marian. For a moment, she kept her mask of calm. But then cracks began to show. Her lips trembled, her hands clenched. Finally, she snapped. "This is your fault," she screamed at Derek, slamming her hand on the table. "You were supposed to play along, to make it look natural. But you got greedy, you drew too much attention." The courtroom erupted. Derek jumped to his feet. "My fault? You told me father wanted me to have everything. You said Elena didn't care." His voice cracked in panic. "You used me, mother." The mask was gone. Marian's carefully built image of the perfect wife and mother crumbled into anger and blame. She turned to the judge, to the lawyers, to anyone who would listen, her words spilling out in wild bursts of rage. But the more she spoke, the guiltier she looked. Elena didn't move. She let them destroy themselves. Her father sat frozen in his chair. His eyes, once cold toward Elena, now widened in horror. He stared at Marian, then at Derek, then finally at his daughter. The daughter he had doubted, accused, and rejected. His hands shook as he gripped the edge of the bench. It was as if the world he thought he knew had fallen apart in a single moment. The lies, the manipulation, the years of blind trust. It all crashed down. "Elena," he whispered, his voice breaking. You were protecting me." For the first time in years, their eyes met, and he saw her clearly. Not as Marian had painted her, not as Derek mocked her, but as the strong, loyal daughter who had never asked for anything except his love. The judge called for order, but the truth was already laid bare. Marian had stolen from him. Derek had been a pawn. And Elena, the daughter he had cast aside, was the only one who had fought for him. Marian screamed at the guards as they moved to escort her out, her words bitter, her eyes burning with hatred. Derek sat collapsed in his chair, his smugness gone, his future ruined by the very woman he had trusted most. And Elena? She stood in the center of it all, her shoulders squared, her heart pounding but steady. For the first time, she was not the forgotten daughter. She was the one who brought the truth into the light. Her father's face was pale with shame, but his eyes glistened with something else too: regret, sorrow, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of understanding. Father, broken and ashamed, apologizes privately to Elena for failing her. It happened the evening after the court ruling. The house was quiet, stripped of Marian's presence, stripped of Derek's loud voice. Her father sat alone in his study, the same room where Elena had once confronted him weeks before. This time, his shoulders were bent, his face pale with regret. When Elena stepped inside, he looked up at her with eyes heavy with sorrow. For a long moment, he couldn't speak. Then his voice, low and trembling, finally broke the silence. "Elena, I failed you," he whispered. "I let her poison my mind. I let myself believe her lies about you. I turned away from my own daughter. There is no excuse." Elena's throat tightened. For years she had longed to hear words like this, but now they came not with joy, but with pain. She looked at him, this man who had once been her protector, now hollowed by guilt. "You hurt me," she said softly. "More than anyone else could. I didn't care about the money. I only wanted you to see me, to remember that I was still your daughter." His eyes glistened with tears. "And I forgot. I let myself forget. If I could take it back, I would. All I can say now is, I am sorry, Elena. I am so sorry." For the first time in a long time, Elena saw honesty in his face. Not excuses, not defenses, but truth. It didn't erase the years of pain, but it opened a small door inside her heart. The court had already delivered its decision that morning. Marian was found guilty of fraud and sentenced for her crimes. The stolen money would be returned. Derek, exposed as a pawn in his mother's schemes, lost every claim to the inheritance. The empire and fortune, by law, now belonged to Elena. But when the judge asked what she wished to do with her father's estate, Elena surprised everyone. She stood tall, her voice steady. "I don't want it," she said. "I only ask for one thing, my mother's necklace." Gasps filled the room. People whispered, unable to understand why she would give up millions for a single piece of jewelry. But for Elena, the choice was simple. That necklace had once belonged to her mother. She remembered how it rested against her mother's collarbone, how it sparkled in the light when her mother leaned down to kiss her goodnight. After her mother's death, she had never seen it again. Marian had locked it away with the family jewels. Holding it now in her palm after so many years, Elena felt a weight lift from her chest. This was her inheritance. Not money, not property, but love. The necklace was proof that her mother's memory could not be erased, that Elena's place in this family could not be stolen. Her father watched her with awe. "You could have taken everything," he said softly. "And yet you chose this?" She nodded. "Because I never wanted wealth. I wanted truth. I wanted dignity. That's something no one can take from me." Tears slipped down his face, and for the first time in years he reached for her hand. "You are stronger than I ever imagined. Stronger than me. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but if you allow me, I will spend the rest of my days trying to rebuild what I destroyed." Elena's heart ached, but she squeezed his hand. "That will take time. Trust isn't given in a day. But maybe it can be rebuilt." He nodded, his shoulders trembling with the weight of both shame and hope. And so the long road began. Her father started to change. Not overnight, not perfectly, but slowly. He visited her in her apartment, asked about her work, listened when she spoke. He no longer leaned on Marian's voice or Derek's presence. Instead, he tried to hear Elena for who she was. For Elena, the scars remained, but so did her strength. She had walked through betrayal, lies, and loneliness, yet she stood taller than ever before. She had fought for truth and won. And as she wore her mother's necklace around her neck, resting just above her heart, she knew she carried more than just a piece of jewelry. She carried her mother's love, her own dignity, and the proof that she had never needed money to be whole. Her father was beginning a journey of repentance. Derek and Marian were gone from their lives. And Elena, no longer the silenced daughter, was finally standing in her own light. She was stronger. She was wiser. She was unbroken. Elena visits her mother's grave, holding the necklace gently in her hands. The silver felt cool against her skin, but it carried a warmth that came from memory, from love. She stood silently for a while, looking at the name carved into the stone. For a moment, she was that little girl again, hiding in her mother's arms, safe from the world. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but steady. They tried to erase me, Mama. They tried to make me feel like I was nothing. But I'm still here, stronger, wiser, unbroken. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but these tears were different from before. They were not tears of pain or weakness. They were tears of release, of letting go of the hurt that had chained her heart for so long. She touched the necklace to her lips, closing her eyes. It wasn't gold or diamonds, but to her it was more valuable than all the money her father had left Derek. This necklace was proof of her mother's love, proof that Elena belonged, that she had always been worthy. The cemetery was quiet except for the soft sound of the wind moving through the trees. Elena took a deep breath and stood taller. Her life was hers now. No stepmother, no stepbrother, no twisted lies could define her anymore. The sun was rising behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Elena smiled softly, turning away from the grave. With each step she took, she felt lighter, freer, as if she was walking out of the shadow of betrayal and into her own light. She held the necklace close to her heart and whispered one last promise to her mother. I'll keep walking forward. I'll live with truth, with courage. That's what you gave me, and that's what I'll carry forever. As the sunlight touched her face, Elena knew this was not an ending but a beginning. Her strength was her true inheritance, her dignity her greatest treasure. Sometimes, she realized, the greatest inheritance is not wealth, but the strength to stand when everyone else wants you to fall. Lubas. Two hearts, thank you for staying with me till the end. Don't forget to like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more stories. See you next time. Sparkles.